So very, very warm welcome to you all. Thank you very much for being here. Also, because it's such nice weather outside, we're very happy that you chose to be here. This is the WeMakeThe.City Festival, Minority Report. The WeMakeThe.City Festival is focused on inclusion this year. So you will find it be part of all the programs of WeMakeThe.City. But today we will pay extra attention to the inclusions of Amsterdammers with a so-called migration background or without a migration background. So I'm going to look at the program makers now because our first speaker, our introducer of this beautiful morning, Jerry Afrië, is he here? Oh, he will be here in 1 minute. Oh, that's great. That's great. Oh, there I see also Indy Johar walking in. Hi. Nice to see you. Okay, then I will go on. And then when we see Jerry walking in, he will jump the stage and take over from me. So, my name is Zoe Papa Ikonomou. And I have to say, to be asked to be the moderator of this event, for me, is being like a kid in a candy store. Professionally, but also personally. Because, and I think it's a safe space here to say that I'm a really proud Amsterdammer. I was not born here, but I was raised here. I migrated here with my family when I was 3. And I'm also an Amsterdammer with a migration background, Greek in my case, which you might have guessed because of my long name. But I also have a white native background because my mother was born and raised in Amsterdam as well, and she's white. So, in general, I guess both parts are really important for me, and it depends in which group I am, how people perceive me sometimes. So when I'm with mostly white native Amsterdammers, they would consider me quite exotic. But this can be the other way around when I'm in a group with mostly Amsterdammers with a migration background. So this has meant many things in my life. I will not tell this to you today. But in general, I could say that I always felt very, very safe to call myself an Amsterdammer. I was confused at many points about Dutchness, Greekness, but I was always an Amsterdammer. And maybe that's also a nice common ground to keep in the back of our minds. So, and professionally, I'm a research journalist and a media educator. I focus on diversity and inclusion in mass media. I wrote my first book together with Annebrecht Dijkman about diversity and inclusion in mass media. It's called Got an Angry Muslim for me. We interviewed over 50 journalists and experts about their experiences with diversity in media production and their experiences on working on, in media companies. Okay, enough about me. I have seen, yes, I saw him, he is here. I will go on with all kinds of general remarks and nice stuff, but I really want to introduce you to Jerry Afrië. A warm welcome.
Good morning. How y'all doing? Are you sure? Because you sound like, I don't know. I know for some of us it's early. But if you want to make an inclusive city, get used to it. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, non-binaries and others. I was asked to deliver an opening speech this morning. It was very much a friendly request. But from there, the pressure was on. Until this very minute. My name is Jerry King Luther Afrië. I'm a poet and a human rights activist. And Amsterdam, this great city, is what I call home. I know my way around. I've walked every corner and tried to talk to every living thing. I know the poor, the rich, the ambitious young men and women, the dreamers, the lovers, the hateful, the bigots, the buyers, the sellers, the parents, and children. In my daily life and work, I meet these diverse people who occupy this small territory in Western Europe, in the Netherlands. Every day I'm reminded how blessed I am to walk amongst the seas that will breathe an inclusive air into this wonderful city. And as it grows, stretches, and spreads its wings further from the port of Amsterdam into the province, we are met with great expectations and many more responsibilities, such as employment, healthcare, urban planning, cultural institutions, and education. We have turned a soggy, swampy area into a metropolis, and today, Amsterdam is a city to be reckoned amongst the cities of the world. So far, we have managed to create one of the most livable cities in the world. Compared to many other cities, we have a lot to be proud and vocal about. So I understand when people say to me, be happy, black symbol, or this is the best country in the world. If you don't like it, go back to Africa, to your animal families. From this choice of words, one can conclude that the dream of transition from a mere diversity to inclusion has yet to be fulfilled. The good news is it can be done. It is not my intention or that of this event to stop anyone from enjoying the fruits of their city, nor do we seek to stop talents from accomplishments. As a matter of fact, I want you to be proud of what this city has given us. What I'm asking of you is to not look away, not even for a second, from the contributions that were made by all of us and all of our ancestors. It's been too recent to forget that this city was built on the backs of the poor, enslaved and colonized peoples and migrants. This beautiful city wasn't always this beautiful. This was a swamp inhabited by mostly peasants. Something needed to be done, and it could not be done by mere white people. This city has flourished because of a collective effort. So if one wants to make this city inclusive, shouldn't we start there? Before anything else, shouldn't we ask ourselves the question, who are we, when we say we make the city? I know of children whose parents and grandparents were born here just as they were. They speak native tongues and are culturally Dutch and have never set one foot across the border. Yet, someone has made them collectively believe they have no business being here, or that they have no right to ask for equality or justice. To most natives, non-whites, the so-called allochtonen, will forever be merely guests. The only difference between my children and white boys and girls of their age is their skin tone and country of origin. And although they were born here and will probably die as well here, they are left out of decision-making processes and higher education and placed in disfranchised communities. Living in disfranchised communities also means visiting poor schools, except we do not call them poor schools. We call them black schools. You can guess what the rich schools are called. White schools. 2 years ago, I sat down with one of the country's most critical acclaimed documentary maker, Sonny Bergman, during the release of a documentary, The White Color. The documentary emphasizes on white privileges and dissects the hidden discrimination embedded in the white mind. After watching the documentary, many white people realized for the first time that their skin color is not just a color, but also opens many doors and borders that are closed behind them to half of the city residents. As a result of the documentary, Sonny Bergman received a lot of messages from white people with the question, what can I do? Together with Pakhuis de Zwijger, we started the platform WeMakeThe.City, White People's Turn to Move, to meet the demand. The aim of WeMakeThe.City is to eradicate or at least denormalize racism at schools, in the workplace, in daily interaction, and during upbringing. Despite growing diversity in demography and despite our coffee shops and red light districts, inclusion and equality are hoarded by institutionalized racism and inequality. The distribution of power and agencies are slow as 1940 computers. Education is intended to provide all children in the Netherlands with the means to progress in society, but our current education system promotes inequality. For decades, studies have shown that many other things. Among many other things, income and the household you are born in are decisive for academic success. Vitan said, I've spent the last 2 years together with teachers, parents, and other professionals to combat opportunity inequality within education. As we are plagued by segregation in education, structurally lower recommendations for higher education, Eurocentrism in the curriculum, and the lack of representation of teachers in the education. Our manifesto, Equality of Educational Opportunities in Primary and Secondary Education, was signed by nearly all major political parties, as well as the current Amsterdam government. My contribution to this society, this place I call home, among many other things, is to let children of migrants who are just as Dutch and Amsterdam's as any other kid in the city to not give up. At this very moment, we are working to get school boards to sign an unprecedented education agreement which will allow civil society and parents to hold schools accountable for poor performance and poor education. I will admit these are small steps, but the optimist inside me says, even when you crawl, you are still going forward. You see, I want these children to see the opportunities of tomorrow through their very own eyes, to expand their minds to greater achievements than the city ever held possible, even for white kids, and to assure them that the dreams of their parents and grandparents, the dream of feeling safe and worthy, the dream of feeling at home and belonging, is only seconds away for their generation. This is a great city, but it can become far greater. And I guess which city you're from, all of us are here, whether you're from London, Paris, I believe they are all great cities, but they can become far greater, better, safer, richer, maybe more important, inclusive. How are we going to get there? Simple, together. There's no me or you on this journey. There's only us. And until we learn that, there's no we in WeMakeThe.City. Today, you are going to hear from professors, academics, activists, thinkers, and doers. Their words are needed, and their actions and dedication should at least inspire a new direction and a new city, an inclusive city. I hope you are just excited as I am. Let's go.
So, I think Jerry woke us up, I think. So is everybody awake now? Yes, thank you very much, Jerry. This was great. So I am curious what kind of people we have in our room. Are there many policymakers here today? Policymakers? No? Nobody? Ah. Here. Oh, and here. And somebody who's doubting. Educators. Ah, yes. Researchers. We have a lot of researchers here today. That's great. Journalists. Other. Well, again, a very warm welcome to you all. So today at WeMakeThe.City at Minority Report, we will start by talking about the changing demography of Amsterdam, and then we will compare with other cities. We have some esteemed guests from other cities who are going to tell how the changing democracy and inclusiveness is with them in their cities. And at the second part, after the coffee break, we will talk about the transition from diversity to inclusion. And we have great music today as well from Shoshani. Okay, I have to make some general remarks because we have a very full program today. So there will be definitely room for questions, but I would like to ask you to keep it to informative questions for this morning. We have great breakout sessions interactive this afternoon. There will be ample room for passionate monologues, discussion, or any other way you want to express yourself, please do. But it would be great if you can keep it to informative questions today because we have so many inspiring speakers and we want to learn from them, of course. Also, but I see you knew that because you all look beautiful today. We are being live streamed, so also a warm welcome to our online viewers. And not unimportant, so we have a coffee break. It will be at 10:45, and we will finish up this morning around 12:30. Also, because we have such a full program, I want to ask your forgiveness beforehand, because sometimes maybe you will see me creeping up to a speaker because I have to keep an eye on the time, or if I have to ignore your raised hand, I'm very sorry, but we have to keep time management. That's all the things we said beforehand. Time management, important. Okay, I will shut up about it now. We're going to do some questions again for you, but you will need your smartphone for it, because we have Professor Maurice Crul here. He will be our first speaker, or second speaker, of course, after Jerry. And he is the principal researcher of a research project that explores attitudes and experience of Amsterdammers without a migration background. So these are some questions that are from his survey, Becoming a Minority. He will also do some questions himself when he is speaking later on. But we thought it would be interesting to see also a little bit more. Ah, there we are. Oh, fast. Some of you are very fast. Oh, bling. Oh, is there? Oh, the code. Yeah, the code is so menti.com, and then you can use this code to go in. Oh, yes. It's not working, Glenn? Oh, it is. Oh. Yeah, take your time. Take your time. I was surprised that people were already. It's also interesting because we can see how many people are here today. Take your time, and once you're in, you're in. So that's also good to know. Were you born in the Netherlands? So the definition of a person with a migration background, I'm looking with one eye to Maurice Crul as well, so he will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's if you're born outside of the Netherlands or your parents are born outside of the Netherlands, and then it ends, I believe.
No, it's one parent.
One parent, yeah. One or both parents, yeah. So if you are third or fourth generation, then finally you are an Amsterdammer punt. Point. Dot. A Wi-Fi code. De zwijgen. And the password is also de zwijgen. Small letters. So I see we have 2/3 of the people here are born in the Netherlands. How is it going? Are people still trying to get in? Also, I think they can stay in also later on for Maurice's. Okay, I think we need to go to the next question, though. Okay, so that was like around 2/3 born here. Okay, were your parents born in the Netherlands? Okay, now it's becoming the 50-50 we talked about. Because, of course, Amsterdam is a super diverse city. We do not have a majority anymore. So it's interesting that we can see that in this room. Yeah, it's even a little bit more people with a migration background, I see. Next. Do you feel, interesting, very interesting question, do you feel like a minority in your neighborhood? It's good to see that people feel part of their neighborhoods. Oh, the yes is going a bit up now. I don't know. I can see that we are almost with 100 people today. That's so good. I think the next one, this is the final one. Very interesting as well. A question about your habits. So, do you ever go to festivals with another cultural tradition? Can be food, drinks, music, whatever. Or did you copy a habit from another culture? Like eating a hot meal for lunch. I made an effort to speak some words in another language to connect with neighbors? So I'm interested, who copied a habit from another culture? Can I see a show of hands? Who copied a habit from another culture? I see many. I am curious. Is there somebody with a microphone here? Oh. This one. This is on. Because it would be interesting to hear what kind of habits these are. So all the fingers are gone. No, I'm coming. Where are you? Ah, sir. Thank you for this. So could you explain to me what kind of habit this is?
I was born in Curacao, and I've copied, for instance, eating and making pannenkoek like the Dutch do. Also eating herring.
Ah, yeah.
Which is not our custom in the Caribbean. And also listening to jazz music, because before moving to Holland, I didn't know jazz, and now I enjoy it a lot.
Thank you. Somebody else? Ah.
Hi, I copied a lot of habits from India, so meditating, yoga, eating Ayurvedic food.
Thank you, yeah. One final one, maybe? I saw Glenn. Glenn, I saw you with your raised hand before. Glenn Helberg, speaker later on.
Well, I'm the same as him. I come from Curacao, and I started eating hot meals at 6. At 6.
Ah, you changed it the other way around. That's great. Okay, dear audience, thank you very much for this. It's high time we go to our first speaker. Yes. So, without further ado, I will give the floor to Professor Maurice Crul. He is professor in Identities, Diversity and Inclusion at the Free University of Amsterdam. And he is the principal researcher of Becoming a Minority, the research which he just answered questions from. Maurice.
Yeah, thank you. The questions you just answered are part of a big project we are doing at the moment in 6 European cities. 6 cities where the people of Dutch descent or Swedish descent or German or Belgian descent have become a minority, a numerical minority in that city. And for like 40 years now, we're doing research on the integration of migrants, their children, their grandchildren, into cities, into society, but we actually now turned around the question. We are looking at people of Dutch descent in a city like Amsterdam, and if they are connected to that diverse city. So, since 2011, Amsterdam has become a so-called majority-minority city, a city where everybody in the city from different ethnic groups now is a numerical minority. And this is the case for the people of Dutch descent since 2011. This was then 49%, and now it's 46% of the people in Amsterdam are of Dutch descent. But if we look into the future, and that's best to be done if you look at the younger generation under the age of 15, only 1 in 3 of the children in Amsterdam is of Dutch descent. And this is not only white Dutch children in this category. Also grandchildren, for instance, of Surinamese migrants whose parents are born in the Netherlands and who themselves are born in the Netherlands are also considered to be of Dutch descent according to the statistical categories we use in Amsterdam and in the Netherlands. So that category of 1 in 3 is more diverse than only white Dutch children. And this raises, of course, new questions. I think we stand for one of the biggest social and psychological transformation in our times, and especially a transformation that affects people of Dutch descent. Because I think two things have to be on the agenda nowadays, more prominent for people of Dutch descent. They have to become part of that diverse city, but also they have to start sharing power with other groups in the city. Representativity is important also from a democratic point of view. So how are the people of Dutch descent connected to that diverse city? We did a survey here in Amsterdam among 400 people of Dutch descent in the age category between 25 and 45, and we asked them a number of questions, especially in the neighborhoods where they have become a numerical minority in Amsterdam. And that's 40% of the neighborhoods in Amsterdam. And for instance, we asked them about their closest friendship group. Who are in this closest friendship group? And you see that actually the majority of people only interact in their closest friendship group with people from their own ethnic group, people of Dutch descent. Only 12% of the people who live in these very diverse neighborhoods have a friendship group that is representative of that neighborhood where they live in. So this outcome we also published in the Parool, a big article. So people live in these diverse neighborhoods, they consume diversity, they go to the Turkish bakery, they go to the Moroccan butcher, but actually in practice, in their own networks, in their own friendship groups, they are very much enclosed in their own white bubble. This is part of the story, but an important part of the story, of course. If we look, for instance, at the second generation, a very mixed friendship group. So the picture is very different than the picture you see here. But not everybody is living in that white bubble. There's also people that are connected to that diversity. And we identified 3 groups of connectors. People who have a mixed group of friends, half of their friends or more are of an ethnic background, other ethnic background. People who send their kids to a mixed school, a school which is more representative of the neighborhood they live in, or people who are active in organizations that bring people together from different ethnic backgrounds. So my question is, as you as an artist, what sort of connector are you? So again, we have the Mentimeter, and you can fill in. I think we're almost there. And this outcome actually is very similar to the outcome we found in the survey. The groups, the 3 types of connectors are almost equal in size. And interesting also is that they hardly overlap with each other. So you would expect, for instance, that people who send their children to a mixed school would also have a close friendship groups that is also mixed half or more of their friends. But this is not the case. So these three types of connectors are hardly overlapping. And that's interesting for various reasons, because that also means that they, in that neighborhood and in the city, will connect to different people. So for instance, the people that are active in organizations are often more younger people, and that also grew up with that diversity themselves already, going to school or university. So, sorry. How big is the group? Well, about 2/3 of these people that we saw before live in their white bubble, but also 1/3, 1 in 3 of the people in these diverse neighborhoods is a connector. So that is a considerable group. And as you saw in the room here, there's also many, many connectors in this room too. So we are looking more closely now, who are these people that are connectors, according to our survey. And we take the group that send their children to a mixed school. And first of all, they are very highly educated. And that's different than in the other two groups of connectors. So 83% has a higher education diploma. And even 40% works in a managerial job, in a leading position. Where do they live? They really live everywhere in these cities that often are known as migrant neighborhoods. They live in Southeast, in Gein, they live in Osdorp, in Slotervaart, in Spaarndammerbuurt, in the north of the city. But often they live in a home-owned apartment. So often they live in a part of that neighborhood that is more affluent. Are they believers in the multicultural society they live in? Yes, they are. 86% state that mixed schools are good for their children. So it's a conscious choice to send their children to these schools. And 80% states that diversity is enriching to have a diverse neighborhood and to meet a diverse group of people. Are they preachers? Yes, also that is a characteristic of their group. They also want other people to mix more with the people in their neighborhood and in the city. Do they suffer from self-hatred? This is the Baudet question, you could say. Are they so involved in this diverse society and believers in multiculturalism that they started to hate their own group? No. 63% say they are proud to be Dutch. Are they uncritical? Again, another argument of people on the right say, okay, these multicultural people, they're naive and uncritical about issues in society. But 40% is critical of aspects of the Islam, for instance. Is there also gain in being connectors? So we always talk about diversity and multicultural societies, but we hardly talk about what is to gain to live in such a diverse surrounding. And one of the things we asked also, this is the people who send their children to mixed schools, how many contacts they have in the neighborhood. And this is a group that has very, very many contacts in the neighborhood. You could also choose none or a few, or less than a few, but they are all on the side of many contacts in the neighborhood. And do they feel at home and safe in the neighborhood? We have a number of questions about this, and this is a group that also feels more safe and more at home in the neighborhood. And they also use more facilities in the neighborhood, like the playground and the park. And they also state more that they feel comfortable in these places. So being connector also pays off because you feel more at home in this diverse city than people that are more living segregated in the city. So some of the questions, and there I will end We are, of course, at the beginning of our research, but some of the questions we want to explore further, also together with Pakhuis de Zwijger, is so what is exactly, is it exactly what the connectors do in these neighborhoods? Next to being active in these organizations or sending their children to school. So what do they do? What is sort of underneath these neighborhoods? What do these connections mean for the neighborhood? And maybe what other possible other connectors are there? You can also think of people that connect, for instance, through their work or other organizations that are not in the neighborhood but in the city. Do we maybe also see less conflicts in neighborhoods where there's a lot of connectors in these neighborhoods? We don't know. Maybe this is one of the important things why there's less conflicts in some neighborhoods than in others. And what maybe can the city administration or organizations do to support these connectors? Also something we hardly ask questions about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maurice. Maurice will be back in a few minutes after Laura Michon's talk, and then there will be time to ask questions to Maurice and Laura. So I'm going to introduce Laura Michon. She's a senior researcher for the Amsterdam Municipal Department of Research, Information and Statistics.
Thank you. So I'm going to give a bit more context to the story of Maurice and his figures. I'll come back to a few things he said as well. I have to say I'm a senior researcher at the Department for Research, Information and Statistics of the City of Amsterdam. I'm also part of the Becoming a Minority research team at the VU. I have... we all know that Amsterdam has a long history of migration, but it's only recently, as Maurice said, in 2011, that Amsterdam has become a majority-minority city, meaning that all groups or ethnic groups, you could say, in the city are numerical minorities. This is according to the definition that is used since 1994, that is based on the country of birth of the person and both parents. And as has been said before, people are considered to have a migration background if they themselves, or at least one of their parents, was born abroad. And this figure has also projection until 2040, and you see that the group without a migration background, which is the dark blue, is becoming smaller and smaller. So this is indeed the future of the city, as has been said already by Maurice. What you can see also is that there are actually two trends. So Amsterdam is a majority-minority city, and the minorities are growing, you could say. But it's also a super diverse city, as it is no longer made of large groups, large minorities, but increasingly so of small majority groups of different origins. What we can also see is that the population of Amsterdam is much more diverse than the Dutch population, as in the Netherlands as a whole, 3/4 of the population is born in the Netherlands and have both parents born in the Netherlands. That's the dark blue part of the... so there's a large difference between Amsterdam and the Netherlands, and that is also something you can see from the discussions and how the discussions are led in the national arena and here in Amsterdam. What another trend that we can see is that in the past years, the group of which was called the second generation, so born in the Netherlands but with at least one parent born abroad, was growing. But actually, for 3-4 years now, the group of first generation, so born abroad, is growing. So there's a growing immigration, direct immigration to Amsterdam. And recent figures tend to show that this is still going on. And so now, if you look at this group that has a migration background, the largest part is first-generation immigrants. There are often questions about third-generation immigrants. But there is no registration, so we don't know if someone's grandparents were born in the Netherlands or abroad. A colleague of mine at the city has made, however, an estimation based on young people who so age until 18, and in 2016. About 12% had at least one grandparent who were born abroad. So there's a large debate about whether this is relevant to still look into, but there are very often questions about this. It's still to see, and also because this is a group, and I will come to this. In what category do you put people who have a mixed background? And this is very relevant for the Amsterdam youth, which is much more diverse than the total population, as Maurice has already shown. So at this moment, these are figures for 2018, 40% of those aged until 15 have no migration background. And we made extra figures to look into this group who has a mixed background, and that's the dark green quarter of the second pie. These are children who were born in the Netherlands, and one of their parents was born in the Netherlands as well. But one of their parents was born abroad. And it's really a debate, and we're having this debate at the Department for Research and Statistics, because, I mean, now statistically they belong to the group with a migration background, but this is really a question. I mean, why would we put them in the group with a migration background? They're just as well don't have a migration background. They have both. So maybe we should look at this group as a group with a mixed background. I'm happy to talk with you about this later. We've talked about the majority-minority neighborhoods in Amsterdam, and I put them on a map. And so this will ring many bells probably, because this is what you usually see. So, and the darker blue, the higher the percentage of the population with a migration background. So everyone who knows Amsterdam knows that these are this is the periphery. It mainly concerns the periphery of the city. It's also interesting to realize that although the majority of the population has a migration background, this is the case not in the majority of the neighborhoods. So most of the most of the neighborhoods still have a native majority. This will change, as we have seen, but still, it's really something of the periphery of the city. This also correlates with a number of other characteristics of the population. For example, I've put this map of level of poverty in the city, and you see many resemblances with the previous map. it's mainly at the periphery of the city. There are many other features that correlate with when you look at these majority-minority neighborhoods, like the percentage of social housing, the percentage of the population with a low socioeconomic background, etc. One of the issues that Becoming a Minority project looks into is also the responses in terms of the political response. And this is the outcome of the 2008 municipal elections. 2018 municipal elections. And the color indicates which party had the largest share of votes. I don't see why no. If you look at the, maybe I can show. Yeah. So these are the majority-minority neighborhoods, also here in Zuidoost and in the north. And you can see that there are very different responses in these neighborhoods with different political choices. The dark blue is where the party Denk has had the largest share of votes. So this was particularly the case in Nieuw-West. But in Zuidoost, in all the neighborhoods, GroenLinks was the largest party, so the Green Party. Though in Zuidoost, the level of turnout was very, very low, was the lowest in the city. And in the northern part of the city, you see very different types of responses with Forum for Democratie, who has become the largest party here, but also GroenLinks and Denk, and here also Denk. So these are issues that will be studied further in the Becoming a Minority project to look into these differences of responses in the majority-minority neighborhoods. Thank you.
Oh, please stay here. Thank you very much, Laura Michon. Very interesting. Maurice, please come to the stage again. So, people, we have question time. I see one immediately. Yes.
Why do we still make a distinction between Western and non-Western migrants? What does it mean?
What does it mean?
Who wants to take the microphone?
Yeah, well, I feel very uncomfortable about this distinction as well. It's a distinction that CBS, the National Bureau for Statistics, does, and there have been discussions about changing this, but still a lot of people say it does correlate with a number of other variables like socioeconomic background. Often, not always, but yeah, there is a lot of people are looking critically at this. There's no solution for change yet, but I hope there will be.
I recently interviewed one of the CBS persons, and they told that they are really looking into changing it now because it's also based on, well, a feeling of superiority from Western cultures. Yes, sir.
In fact, I wanted to stress that because. It's not the CBS that invented it. It were researchers in the 80s who separated the two groups. You have migrants from white countries and migrants from non-white countries. That's the basic of the idea. So CBS executes something thought out and presented by researchers and taken over by government. There are proofs of that.
No, it's true, but the difficulties, for example, Indonesian people are considered Western. So also Japanese, Dutch people are considered Western. So it's such a strange separation. It's okay. Other questions for Maurice and Laura?
Hi, my name is Lieve. I have a question for Maurice about the connectors. I was wondering, can you tell us a bit more about did you look into the kind of practices that connecting entails apart from sending your child to a certain school? Because you can be sending your child to a certain school, but does that mean you are connecting with anybody, right? Especially also since you mentioned that the different types of connecting don't necessarily overlap, and you can state that you love multicultural society and live in your white bubble, as I myself have to admit to. So, thank you.
Yeah. Well, we have to analyze the data further, but I'm also an educational specialist, so I have seen a lot of initiatives in the city where schools, the purpose was schools to send children to the neighborhood school, and what effect that had on both the children and the parents. And I think in the beginning there was sort of naive idea that if you just have every neighborhood child in the school, this will just work well also for the parents. But I think most schools in the end found out that yes, the children do mix when they go to school together, and that's not such a big issue. But the more important issue for the school is to get the parents together in a way. And this is reflected a bit in our data. But I'm not entirely negative there. So indeed you see in their close friendship circle, it's not mixed, so it doesn't translate in their close friends. But we also ask about the friends that are not close friends, but that are friends of them, and there you do see that their friendship group is more mixed than for other people that don't send their children to these mixed neighborhood schools. So there is an effect, but not in their close friendship group. So I can't hear you.
They're participants instead of connectors, I believe.
Well, I mean, this is a question that we should do more research in. Because like I said, they are connected to people outside their ethnic group, but we have to see, they're not their closest friends, but we have to see, okay, what does that connection mean also for instance, their activities around the school or in the neighborhood. So that is still a question, but I'm not entirely negative in that sense. So I still would continue for the time being to call them connectors, but maybe it turns out differently. I agree.
I'm also looking, I'm getting signals from all over that time, but there was a lady here in front who already signaled she had a question. That has to be the final question for now. Okay, then, I'm going to the lady over there. And that's the final. Sorry, ladies first. There was also a gentleman, but then,
Well, I was just wondering if you also have this kind of figures from other cities and what we can learn from them.
Oh, we're going to that part now. So, so I want to thank Maurice and Laura very much for their very interesting talks. Give them a warm applause. It was interesting to see, though, when the news about Maurice's research came out, as many of you might know, that in the Netherlands, most journalists do not have a migration background. It was very interesting to see how that news landed. What? Are we a group as well? So I'm very happy for this research. Thank you for it. Okay, so we're going, as the friendly lady asked, to the other cities, because there are many cities in Europe that face a similar transition as Amsterdam. So we invited one entrepreneur and 3 researchers to share their experience and knowledge with us. So please give a warm welcome to Marina Lazari, Jens Schneider, Stijn Oosterlink, and Indy Johar. So they're going to introduce themselves, so I have a little bit of rest. So can I ask, well, I would say maybe ladies first. So Marina, to start by shortly introducing yourself.
Thank you. My name is Marina Lazari. I am from Albania, and I've lived in the Netherlands for 9 years. So I'm part of this Dutch people with a migration background. I am a PhD candidate at the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, and I'm working actually at the project of Maurice Crul, so that's easy for me because I don't have to present it further. I am focusing on the city of Malmö in Sweden, and that's also what I will be talking about today.
Thank you. Jens?
Okay, my name is Jens Schneider. I'm from Hamburg, and I live in Hamburg. And I'm an anthropologist by training. I did research also on diversity, superdiversity, and we're currently investigating how cultural institutions like theaters, museums, and cultural politics react to increasing diversity and the migration society.
Indy?
Hi, I'm Indy Johar from London.
Okay. I'll give us a little bit more.
All right, okay. I'm a Londoner, and I was born in London. We'll talk largely about the London experience from Dark Matter Labs.
Thank you. Stijn.
Good morning. I'm Stijn Oosterling from the University of Antwerp. I'm an urban sociologist, and I chair a research team that is doing a lot of research on poverty and diversity in cities and on socially inclusive ecological transitions. And I was involved in a European research project in which we analyzed 15 different cities across Europe and in Canada about how they dealt with urban diversity.
Thank you. Well, we are very happy that you are here. So you have listened, of course, to Maurice and Laure as well. And I am interested, what did you take from it? Was it very similar, or did you see striking differences with your own cities? Maybe, Indy, can I start with you?
Sure. I suppose I sat there thinking about London and London's arc, especially recently over the last few years with Brexit. And what you see is the number of racial attacks across the UK has massively gone up since 2012, 2014. So what you're seeing is actually a project which is actually, I think, significantly under attack in some fashion. And I think there's something I've been reflecting on quite hard. And then the other part of the question I was always sitting there going is, how are we framing these questions? To what privilege are we framing these questions that we're examining? What defines minority? What defines, I love the drawings of those neighborhoods which sort of clustered every minority as every group, whether you're Turkish or anything else, as you're some other. I was like sitting there going, what are we defining here and for whose purpose? What narrative is this going to create? What narrative are we supporting in this process? And it worried me, genuinely, because I sat there and thought, this is supporting the construction of narratives. And the reality is, if you take the long arc of I would say, emancipation and freedom, actually, you know what? Was it sort of women got the vote in 1912, right? So if you look back at it, you don't have to go that far, early 1900s, most men didn't have the vote. So actually, if you look at the arc of emancipation, we've been on a journey of freedom. And we have to recognize this isn't just about freedom, it's a continuous process. We're discovering new and new freedoms. And so this idea that there is a minority and a majority, the reality is, if you looked at wealth distribution in this city and wealth concentration in this city, you'd really see the diversity, where the real diversities are. So there's a massive concentration of wealth in the hands of the very few. And I wonder, and this is just my speculation on a London perspective, is that we focus hugely, and I think there's good reason to focus on on huge issues that we have between ourselves. But underpinning it all is also an economic sort of concentration. So since 2008-10, when Piketty came out with the whole story of actually concentration of capital, almost simultaneously there's been a massive and equivalent conversation about race and racism, right? I also think that we have to deal with this in a completely different way, not through just a lens of that. We have to talk about how we emancipate ourselves totally as societies. And it is not about some part of society giving away freedom to another part of society. I think this is a rubbish narrative, right? It's not about inclusion of one society to another. I think this is about emancipation of all of us in a much more radical way. And I think it goes back into boring stuff, the nature of the statistics that we write, the nature of, well, if your parents lived here, if your parents were born here, you're a native. I think these are all concepts. They are structuring narratives. And I think if we're going to make this transition, and I would argue London has gone down the other arc of this transition, which is it's going to struggle, right, to make this transition. Why? Well, since 2010, middle-class wages were totally flatlined. Middle-class wages had flatlined, and if you make people precarious in their economic life, right, you make them vulnerable to fear. And if you make them vulnerable to fear, then narratives can be used to destroy inclusion very quickly. So I think we have to talk about the context of complete emancipation of everyone. And I think that is going to be key. Now, in that context, there is huge historic disparities, right? I'm not ignoring those disparities. There has been whole issues of colonization, whole issues of that, but only in recognizing it can we make ourselves free. Right? Colonization has affected all of us, whether you're white or whether you're not white, whether you're Western or not Western. Actually, it only benefited a very few handful of people. And I think we have to talk about this from a long arc of morality. And the long arc is we're in a long arc of transition, of inclusion, of all of us as society. I mean, I find it ridiculous women only got the vote many parts of the world since the 1920s. I mean, that's like 1920s? What were we doing for thousands a year before that? And then it goes all the way through. So that was my personal reflection. I think London is struggling, I would argue, and I think the UK is struggling, and I think we're seeing the rise of identity politics in sort of national politics, nationalization, national politics, which I think is going to be very difficult to deal with unless we can actually talk about how we make inclusive futures, really radically inclusive futures of all of us. And the future has been, I think, stripped away into the hands of the few. And I think we have to democratize our capacity to make dreams and democratize our imagination of what the future looks like. Because I think if the future looks like a zero-sum game, then it's only a division of how much you have and how much I have. And the future is infinite. And I think we have to start to enjoy its infiniteness to be able to actually give space to everyone to actually be able to acknowledge it, whilst acknowledging huge historic challenges. We have to acknowledge them. It will set us free. It is only in the act of acknowledgement that we set ourselves free on both sides.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This was very interesting for you to share this in this way. Maybe because I saw everybody writing frantically. I mean, maybe can you respond to that? Are we looking at it in the right way? Are these the narratives we should take? Stijn, maybe?
Well, this is a hard question. I think we need different narratives. Maybe I should relate to the question about the statistics. It's often very hard because statistics are a standardization, it's a simplification of reality, but often we need these kind of simplifications. So I explained to you one number. We work on poverty and diversity. In Belgium, the general level of poverty is 13%. Amongst the people with a Moroccan background, which means people which themselves were born in Morocco or their parents were born in Morocco, it's over 50%. So I need to be able to say this. I need to use the statistics. But of course then, the question is, how do you interpret the statistic?
Why do you need to say that? Why is that necessary?
Because the access to income is terribly important.
Why do you say that?
Because I'm a sociologist, and my whole discipline is based on the idea that inequality, material inequality, matters hugely to people in terms of opportunity.
Why don't you say that? I mean, I suppose that's my point. Why do you use a proxy as opposed to just saying what you just said there?
Because you need to prove that this is actually the case.
But being from Morocco proves it?
Well, I mean, that's the second part of the answer is the question then is what does it mean to say people with a Moroccan background? And then, of course, people can make all kind of interpretations. They could say, well, it's because of culture. They don't have the right working attitude and so on. So that's where you have to go further and say, what is behind the ID with a Moroccan background? And then I say there is a particular historical trajectory behind that, which is these people came here mostly from a rural background. They moved to Western Europe because they had to prop up a declining industry with low wages. And when they were making their way into the system, the industry collapsed and they were trapped. And they've been trapped ever since. below the escalator. And then you compare with, for example, Eastern European migrants who came also as labor migration, but in different sectors, which is still there, and which are making more progress on the socio-economic sphere than these people with Moroccan background. So you have to tell the story and the trajectory behind it.
I think that's what I was trying to get to, is the story is so much more interesting and relevant and humanizes and recognizes whole multiple different issues that are sitting behind it, not the caricature of geography. And I suppose that's what I'm trying to get to, is how do we have, so the story told, absolutely, I buy it, right? I can see what that history is. And there's whole sorts of other issues behind it, right? So how do we get to richer conversations of this and give ourselves a time to have that? Because I think the caricaturization, the statistical proxies that we're using are actually problematic, and they're creating typologies of debate which are actually not helpful.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's always difficult, but because I always also notice, especially with researchers, they want to, they want to measure stuff, and they want to have different kind of categories. But I do agree that what are you saying when you are measuring it all the time? Maybe Marina, I mean, you have listed now, and what is you're also a researcher, of course.
What you are saying when you are measuring all the time, you are painting a picture, and I agree that it can be a problematic picture. It is a picture that maybe marginalizes some stories. It's not necessarily a narrative when you're painting a picture with statistics, but you are painting a picture, and I think that the picture is really important if we're trying to understand, for instance, very simply, where inequalities are located. To take the example of Malmö, Malmö is a really deeply segregated city, and it's very interesting to see. It is also very obviously segregated. You move from one street to the other, and you see a completely different world. It's like you are in a completely different city. And to me, and also for my research, it's really important to map this out. It's a little bit what Laura did in her presentation of Amsterdam. You can map out what is going on and where this is happening. And actually, to go back to something that you said, you also mentioned that the problem of inclusion does not only have to make with background, with ethnic background, it also has to make very much with socioeconomic background. That is something that in Malmö is very, very strong. Segregation is not just ethnic, but it's also very much socioeconomic. So in these neighborhoods where migrants or people with a migration background are concentrated, the white native Swedes living there are also quite poor. And for me, as a researcher, it's really important to see where this is happening, because only then can I sort of figure out, okay, what do we do? So even if I want to speak about it, in order to have the tools to speak about it, I need to know where this is happening. Just to give an example, for instance, Malmö does not see the problem of inclusion as just something that has to do with ethnic diversity. Instead of inclusion, they actually talk about social sustainability at Malmö municipality. So they really think, okay, all of these things are together important, but we need to know what is happening where. And maybe sometimes you need to get a move on that and not necessarily just wait for the narrative to change in a way.
Jens? Maybe you can add from the Hamburg perspective?
Yeah, I think it's a very ambiguous task, and I must admit I have sort of like two hearts in myself. On one side, let's say I believe that Foucault is right, let's say in the sense you name things and you talk about them, so that makes a reality, that creates a reality. And of course all these models are out there and the narratives are out there. So how do you pick them up, and how can you give them a twist? Because there's an obsession, let's say, there's an obsession in Europe, in most European cities, with migration background or with ethnicity and this sort of things. So we have this kind of statistics. Now, you can talk about, does it make sense of Western, non-Western, but there is always this looking into the ethnic background of people. So what does it mean? So I believe that it is, that we cannot just ignore that, or just try to find new narratives and hope to make them sort of in competition to the other ones, but try maybe give it a twist, reading the narratives and reading the numbers that are there. Like, for example, say, okay, Amsterdam is it a majority-minority city in ethnic terms, but if you look at nativity, how many people were born in the city and feel at home in the city, then the picture looks completely different. How many of them are Dutch citizens? Then you see actually there's a solid minority of native-born Dutch citizens that make up the city population. Now, I was asked to tell about something about Hamburg, so and I feel a bit strange because, let's say, when I looked into city statistics in Germany, we have the usual suspects, and that goes back to that discourse thing. So if you ask people in an audience in Germany, so who do you think are the most diverse cities in Germany, people would say it's Berlin, it's Cologne, it's Hamburg, it's maybe the Ruhr area, and they say, no, it's all wrong. Because the most diverse cities in Germany, all in southern city, it's Munich, it's Stuttgart, it's Nuremberg. Frankfurt is probably the only place where people agree. So why is that so? So this is one argument. The most diverse cities in Germany, at least, are cities that are the economically thriving ones, that have had a solid economic boom for the last past 30, 40 years. So this is why they are so diverse. Now, Hamburg is not a majority-minority city in that symbolic terms, and because it's only 32, 34% of the total population that has this so-called migration background. But of course, as you said, for Malmö, also Hamburg is also a polarized city in that sense. It's a very rich city, so that means that you have areas that are very rich and you have areas that are quite poor. And of course, it starts in the poorer area, so we have a number of neighborhoods with more than 50 or even 70% of this so-called migration background. And on the other side, there are neighborhoods, rich neighborhoods, with less than 15%. So there's really something going on there. But, of course, the development is as the same as was pointed out for Amsterdam. If you look at the under 18-old, the minus of age, it's more than 50% in the whole city. And then you have neighborhoods with almost all kids in one way or the other, coming from immigrant families. And I think then from this, this is another narrative. So how do you make these kids participate? So how can you make a school in these areas and part from the moment, oh my God, it's a school with all immigrant children. Wow, this is a good start. I would say, no, these are the children, because again, another number here is 80% of them are native born.
Exactly.
They are from here, or they are born in Hamburg. So it's the same as I just said for Amsterdam. So the challenge is sort of how do you formulate something like belonging? You're born here, you're raised here. This is our kids, and we have to do the best with the kids that we have, and not start from, oh my God, they have a migration background. So this is why what I mean is ambiguity. On the one side, it's of course impressive if you say a majority of the city has a migration background. So just that battle is lost. The battle of those who fight against the fact that we are becoming more diverse. Sorry, that battle is over. Why not start now sort of designing the society that we want to design on the basis that this is a fact, and this is going to be the fact even far more so in 10, 15 years' time.
And maybe letting loose those categories can be part of moving forward. Stijn, maybe because I think you did not tell too much about Antwerp, maybe it's interesting to hear a little bit about that as well.
Yeah. Well, I disagree with Jens. I don't think the battle is lost. If you look at the electoral results of the last European elections, I don't think the battle really is won or lost in any
demographically.
Demographically, but what does that mean?
Now we have to win the political battle.
So Antwerp this year became a minority-majority city. So the demographic numbers that were shown before very much are similar in Antwerp. We became a minority-majority city in demographic terms. But what does that mean in Antwerp? I mean, we have the policy of the Antwerp City Council is explicitly assimilationist. We have an alderman who says, my policy towards diversity is assimilationist. So what battle exactly is won? In the sense there is a demographic shift, and this demographic shift also shows up electorally, in the sense that the conservative right won only narrowly, and the extreme right is not as powerful as it once was in Antwerp, which historically is really a bulwark of extreme right in Europe, much earlier than in many other countries. But still, if you look at the minority majority, if that is the word you want to use, if you look at institutional power, if you look at the patterns of wealth distribution, then the white majority still is in power institutionally and much more so in terms of wealth. So what does it mean to say we have a minority-majority city? It means for me that there is a potential to change this. But this demographic potential will only change things if you turn it into power. And the reality is that the minorities are not well organized politically in such a sense that they can fight the white majority. So the white majority, which is becoming minority, is still politically very well organized and can impose assimilationist policies. So in that sense, minority-majority is an interesting term because it still is a potential, but the potential will not realize itself out of itself. And it certainly is not doing in Antwerp.
Very interesting. No, that's very true what you're saying. I think time is ticking away. So what might be interesting also because of Maurice's research, of course, and what you are saying, that there is this in the systems, but also this white native, in this case Amsterdammers or from your own cities. Do you have examples where you see that they are getting invested in this change, or what would be important to facilitate this change? Maybe we can start at the other end. Indy?
Look, this is just a personal opinion. I'm just very concerned by the language that we sort of very quickly, like you said, white native. I was like,
yeah.
What does that mean?
What's that mean, yeah.
Where are we going with this world? I mean, it's like, I don't know how many of you have looked at DNA in hereditary web things that look at where did you come from? It's like, well, we all came from Africa, and we all took little journeys from there. Like, what are we trying to define ourselves from? And I find this deeply worrying, the language we're starting to characterize ourselves with. And if we do that, we are creating the language, and this is why my only point, statistics are politics in numbers, right? Statistics are politics in numbers. In history, it's always shown that, right? And either we start to actually recognize the politics that we design in our numbers, or we actually let other people design those politics. And I think we have to become much more, we have to grab hold of those numbers, and we have to be part of the story. And I will leave much wiser people in this room to define what is the best arc of taking this forward. But my only thing is that we only survive together, right? Currently, we're in a landscape which is globally at odds with each other. And the scale of destruction that's possible with us being at odds with each other is massive. So we have to, whatever the journey is, we have to find a way to come together as a global civilization and move forward. And I think that requires us to understand other things, but I really do wonder whether the narratives that we're taking are actually helpful in moving us forward. And I think this is, I'm just characterizing, but like war, well, it's not about war. It's not about disagree. Actually, I think we're not at war with anyone. We're actually, in my view, right, there are why I said the historic issues are about freeing all of us, right? And whether it's actually, because the current projections are women have equal pay to men in 2100. It's ridiculous, and that's the UK, right? So these are about freeing all of us. So I want to I'm just conscious about the narratives and the politics we construct. And that's my only point that I'd really like to make, and how we bring fresh narratives to that and fresh politics to that. And I would suggest that nobody, a statistician or even an accountant, should never think they are politics free. We do inherent politics, and there are politics in all the work that we do.
I'm coming to you, Marina. Thank you very much. Yeah. It's also, as a journalist, language is very important, and what you see is that journalists copy a lot of language from researchers, so things exist and keep existing and are getting stronger. They're copying it wrong as well. I think Maurice maybe... No, but...
I would like to make an intervention, because I think the discussion is a bit dubious, to my opinion.
But you have to say something in the microphone then, Maurice, because otherwise not everybody can understand you.
We are all aware of categories and narratives, and we are also, with the Becoming a Minority project, building a new narrative. And part of that narrative is that in the last 30 years, when we talk about diversity, it's been about migrants, their children, and their grandchildren. If we want to move this discussion forward, we also need to involve people of Dutch descent or British descent into that discussion. And when you were asked that question, you avoided to answer that question. But I think we need to answer that question, and we need to engage together in a discussion about these issues.
Totally.
That's the narrative I think we need.
So my only question is, you passively constructed a narrative, right? All I'm asking is, how do you involve lots of people in construction of that narrative? I don't mind the statistics.
Okay, but I want to ask you if you can continue this in the coffee break, because the time is really moving on. And I think, I think that Indy has made his point, which is, I think, a valid point. So Marina, you were jumping up and down as well.
Yes, I'm sorry, because it will be in a way a continuation of this point, and I will also pick up something that Jens said, because I do agree, and as we say in Albanian, I don't remove a single comma from what you said, but I would like to, and I'm making the discussion a little bit more practical, I would like to point out that, to go back to what I said, I do think that labels are important. And you said, Jens, maybe we can move away. Why is it important to label these children as children with a migration background? Yes, I agree, it can be stigmatizing. However, if we think about Sweden, children with a migration background, also the second generation, has, for instance, problems with the Swedish language. And that sounds, well, what does it mean, problems with the Swedish language? It means that they have, for instance, a harder time doing well at school because they have a harder time with Swedish, even if they're born in Sweden, for instance. And it matters, recognizing this matters, and I agree that it fits within a narrative that is problematic. However, this is also a very concrete problem, and ignoring the fact that children with a different background might also have other issues because the society remains majority white, as Stein said, this is also, according to me, not necessarily the solution. So just moving away from these labels, I think, creates other problems. In the United States, you would call this color blindness, for instance. So that was what I wanted to say.
Okay. Thank you. Jens.
I think it moves other issues to the fore. One, we have to accept that there is migration going on, and there's immigration going on. People are on the move, and this is going to be the case. So we need provisions, and that was probably what the refugee summer taught us, that all cities need provisions for newcomers coming into the city, and that they need orientation. If they come from another country, they need language courses, they need housing, they need whatever, social connections, they need jobs, especially, and their children need places in schools. So this is something we have to come to terms with, that immigration is just an essential part of the movements in cities and out of cities. And maybe also be aware that, let's say, the demographic turnover in most European cities is about 10-15% per year. So that means that the total population of a city like Amsterdam is changed within 10 years, statistically, of course, only. Yeah, so to see movements within and out of the city as a normality and just provide pragmatically and rationally the provisions that you need. But this is for immigrants, or this is for newcomers to cities. But stop talking about the children of immigrants as newcomers or as aliens to the cities, but as part of the city, very, very city population. And that means a completely different take on. They don't need orientation. They don't need someone to take it, and I'll show you the city around so that you know it. Maybe it's a question of class. Maybe people from the Bama have not been so frequently in downtown, but that's an issue of poverty and of class. But the other point is they don't need barriers. So we have to move away the barriers that are out there. And this is, of course, the problem. If we still have this obsession about color, about ethnicity, then, of course, people who have a different color, who have a different name, who have a different religion, encounter barriers. And we have to move away these barriers. And that's why of course, I agree, we still have to talk about it in one way or the other, because it's out there, because people discriminate on the basis of religion or on the basis of name. So we have to name that. But also tell them, look, our vision is not diversity, everybody is happy to next to each other, but our vision is post-migrant, post-ethnic, based on, how do you say, civility, civic citizenship, or whatever, however you want to call it.
Stein, thank you, Jens. Stein, finally.
So I think it's important to see also the complexity of the city. If you look at, of course, if people want to know how does a city like Antwerp respond to diversity, the first thing they do is look at policymakers, look at official discourse, and there you see a very clear, for a very long time, a very clear tendency towards assimilationism. And the reason is because in the late 1980s we had the upsurge of the Vlaams Blok, which is an extreme right party who won for 15 years, won elections, become the biggest party. They were never in government, but they cast a very long shadow over debates about diversity in Antwerp. It's virtually impossible to say anything positive about diversity, or you become labeled as naive, as not wanting to label the problems or mention the problems, and so on. However, we also did quite some research in many neighborhoods to ask people about their perceptions of diversity. So you would ask ordinary people long, in-depth interviews of 1 or 2 hours, asking them about how do you feel about diversity in public space, in schools, and so on. And all kind of people, not just the white established residents, but also people with a migration background of different generations. And what was really striking is that there was not a clear pattern in what people said. Much of what they said was also ambiguous, was clearly inconsistent. People would say one thing and then 15 minutes later they would give a counterexample. So many people's perceptions and opinions about diversities are very mixed, inconsistent, ambiguous, and so on. So if you then compare what's been said about diversity on the policy level, very clear assimilationist perspective, which is justified by referring to people's opinions. If you then ask people's opinions, you see a wide diversity of opinions in all kinds of directions, even within the same interview, within the same person. And so what I've learned about that is that we don't have to focus all of the time on policy making. We also have to focus on people's exact perceptions of diversity. And then you see, for example, just to give one example to close my intervention, the official policy in Belgium is that people have to take language classes. And language, because of the historical struggle between the Dutch and the French speaking, is very sensitive in Belgium, especially in Flanders. And so it's very disciplinary. People have to learn and speak the Dutch language, and if they don't, even if in conversation amongst others on the street, it is seen as a sort of communication that they do not want to belong, which of course doesn't make sense. And so what you see increasingly as the government is moving its language classes in a more assimilationist direction, where people have to move from one language, which is problematic because not the language supposed of Belgium, to the Belgian or language, Dutch or French, that in civil society lots of initiatives are popping up in which people say, this is not fun anymore. Language should be functional. It's about communication. It's not about having the grammar completely right. It's about being able to express yourself. And so in a super diverse context of a city, of course, Dutch will probably remain important because that's the only language more or less everybody will share. But it is about valuing language. And so this civil society initiatives about learning to speak the language, in these initiatives, it's less disciplinary, it's less assimilationist. And what people say, they value the linguistic diversity. It's not just about people transferring to Dutch, but also other people being able to learn a little bit of their own language to the other people in this dialogue class, including white established citizens. And so that gives me optimism that the policy level is only one level, and there's a level beyond that, below that, of civil society initiatives, which is much more diverse and which is, I think, gives me a little bit more hope about where we're going with diversity in Antwerp.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was very interesting to hear all your perspectives. It's clear that we definitely need new narratives, but also I think it's very important to research and to talk about ways we can involve alle Amsterdammers, and also especially the ones Maurice is researching, because I also think that is important to see how they can maybe be more involved. Thank you for being here in the Marina, Jens and Stijn. So it's time for music and then a coffee break, of course. We need to digest all this information, I think. So I would like to introduce Shishani. Shishani is a singer-songwriter and she plays here regularly. We are very happy that she's here today as well. Her roots are Namibian and Belgium in origin, but she grew up mainly in the Netherlands. In her work she brings these worlds together. And she will sing a very appropriate song to us today, which is called Minority. Thank you, Shishani.
This is a healing song that I learned from two ladies that were raised in the Kalahari. I will go to minority, but first I want to tell this story because there's always a story to the song. Now, I don't know who can see this, but maybe the front row can see who is on this cover. Well, I don't know. I'll just tell you. So this is a, yeah, I'm sorry for that. It's a grandmother who lives in one of the villages in the Kalahari region in Namibia. And she is part of the San population, also known as, well, popularly referred to as the Bushman people, but they'd rather go by their own names, which is their tribe name, which is either Kung or Jungwas or whatever tribe that they're part of. And so this booklet is actually part of a CD that I recorded 2 years ago with my group Namibian Tales, and we collaborated with these women for a reason. Now, they are the minority of the minority of the minority. Hunter-gatherers, one of the oldest cultures, human cultures in the world, and also thrown into the reserves where they can't live the way they have done for thousands of years. They can't hunt the way they've done. They're blocked. Water is an issue. Education is an issue. The schooling system is not made for them. They're taught in a language foreign to them, and then they fail, and then people point the finger as that they can't join our global capitalist system, but they don't get the tools to actually join. They're already, their legs are cut off before they can even try to walk in that sense. So we started this project because I thought it's so important to look at the knowledge systems of these different cultures that we have all over the world. We're not doing that. So we're not even talking about minorities and their way to assimilate. It's about what could we actually learn. And in this process of working together, we realized, like, wow, these women, the whole village basically, these people are experts at the natural world. They know exactly how animals function, plants function, how to coexist with the nature around us. This is something that we've broken, and now we're talking about sustainable solutions when in basic, the way we live is not sustainable, and yet we look at these people and say, they're primitive and they're backward and they're not, catching up with our system, when actually we're the ones breaking the system. And if we've ever tried to listen to what they had to say, we wouldn't have been in this position in the first place. So I was sitting next to this wonderful lady from Canada yesterday who dropped a few truth bombs about, looking at the root of the problem, which is this complete racist system that we are functioning in. So if we would have listened to the Cree, that says if you cut down the last tree and poison the last river, you will find out that you cannot eat money. So all the things that are on these posters are basically things that I like to sing about, because music gives us way to communicate with you in a different way. And the song that I wanted to share is, indeed, it's called Minority. And why I wanted to sing this is because I learned a lesson of visibility. So, born in Namibia, raised here, I came when I was 5 years old. I've been living in Amsterdam for 10 years. I feel like a complete Amsterdammer. I'm super proud. And this is a place that I could actually become myself, in a way, be myself. As a queer woman of color, I had a lot of issues growing up, how to deal with yourself, with your reality. And I found a safety and a community here. When I went back to Namibia, I was scared because I didn't know how to be. I didn't know whether to hide or whether to give a filtered truth or how to basically present myself. At some point, I realized it's about stepping beyond your fear and using the stage that you have. So I wrote this song, and after releasing the song now, 8 years ago, I got flooded with messages of young girls basically doing their coming out to me via a Facebook message because they had no place to go to. They were afraid what to do with themselves, whether they should commit suicide because they are sinners. They had nobody in their surrounding who was openly gay. And this is the confidence that I actually got in the city and was able to transport there, because I was able to know, like, I'm a full human being. I have something beautiful to give this world. And by singing this song, I realized what it did for little girls, basically, maybe little boys as well, but just being there and speaking despite your fear. So thank you also and for everybody who's dropping these truth bombs, because that's basically what we should be talking about. So enough talking, I'll give you the song.
and rules, telling me what to do. But is there anybody checking up on you? I am no fool, I do what I've got to do. Many have died for a freedom of mind, for the freedom of truth. Could you be guilty for being a little bit different from the rest? Come on, come on, come on now, people. Put yourself to the test. Every minority has a priority. We want to be equally free. Love me or hate me, discriminate me, but you can't change the way I feel. Who is the one to judge? Telling me who to love, telling me how to live, telling me what life is. Oh, how you're mistreating me. I said, oh, how you're mistreating me. And no, 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 no. Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, this ain't the way. Oh, oh, no, 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 no. Oh, no, 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 no. What you say is that I'm not supposed to be walking this earth, that I don't deserve to live a free life. I know I've so much to give to you. I feel no shame despite your blame, 'cause my love is real. Could you be guilty for being a little bit different from the rest? No. Come on, come on, come on now, people. Put yourself to the test. Every minority has a priority. We want to be equally free. Love me or hate me, discriminate me, but you can't change the way I feel. Who is the one to judge? Telling me who to love, telling me how to live, telling me what life is. Oh, how you're mistreating me. I said, oh, whoa, 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 how you're mistreating me. And no, 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 no. Oh, no, 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 no. This ain't the way. Oh, whoa, 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 no, 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 no. Oh, oh, no, 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 no. We need a black sheep to distract us from reality. Point your finger at me, I bet that makes it easy. We need to realize where the true problem lies. It ain't who you are, but the size of your mind. Can you see with your heart and look past preconceptions? Can you see my soul past the labeling section? This is who I am. Gonna stand up proud. Won't let no one bring me down. Ooh, let no one bring me down.
Wow. Thank you so much, Shishani. That was really beautiful. And I think we all needed a little bit of you to relax a little bit and to ease into our coffee break. So thank you again. Please, I would like to invite you to be back in 15 minutes. So not 50, but 15. And take your drinks. So don't feel ashamed to not bring your drinks. You can do. No, yeah. Okay, hello everyone. I see that many people are still coming in with drinks, very good. I hope you had very nice, interesting, or fierce encounters during coffee break. Everything is okay. And I'm happy to see so many people of you again for the second part of our program. Also a part I'm very much looking forward to, because we have talked about the changing demography of Amsterdam. We talked about, we compared cities. We talked about new narratives. And this second part is focused on the transition from a diverse city to an inclusive city. We have a number of speakers, but we will start with Professor Philomena Essed, who is already sitting beside me. And I have to say, I mean, I found it quite difficult. It's quite difficult to introduce Professor Philomena Essed shortly, because she has contributed so much to society with her work on racism, social justice, social change, and inclusion. But I'm going to try. Philomena Essed is a professor of critical race, gender, and leadership studies at Antioch University in the USA. She's known for introducing concepts such as everyday racism and gender-related racism. Her lifelong dedication to social justice resulted among many, many things. But in the now classic book, Everyday Racism, which was published in 1984 and has recently been published again. And currently her research is focused on leadership, dignity, and the protection of universal human values. So, Philomena, did I leave something important out?
Oh my goodness, I'm going home. You left too much out. Do I need a mic, maybe?
Oh, yeah, I don't see you have a... Oh, sorry, there we go. Yeah. Very important part, because...
Yeah, otherwise it remains between you and me.
Yes, and also good to know, of course, I mean, I have the privilege to interview Philomena for around about 15 minutes, but then you definitely have a lot of time to ask questions as well.
Thank you for your generous comments about me. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so you have been here, of course, also at the first part of the morning, and I was wondering what stood out to you? What was something that you found interesting?
I found it interesting to see all the maps and the reaction it created in me, that you immediately sort of see that as other, that is that part, and that is that part, and that is that population, and that is that population. It is a categorizing, although that is what society wants all the time, takes away the humanity of people. So in these interventions spoke to my heart because it is deep radical thinking and rethinking and struggling with what is it that you want to say and why do you want to say. So even the notions of diversity and inclusion. I remember we used to have a group, where is Tui Choa? She used to be part of that group. We had a group of women coming together. We happened to be of diverse background. It was not a thing. We were talking about liberating ourselves as women. This was in the early 90s. And then there was another woman who joined at one point, and she happened to be of Dutch background, and she said, oh, you're a multicultural group. And we had never seen each other as a multicultural group. We were just a group of women, of human beings. So it is a hidden standard that is there. So there goes the notion of diversity in that respect. Inclusion is problematic as well, because who includes? It's almost like the alternative of tolerance, but tolerance we are now all critical about because who tolerates who, but then who includes who? And do you want to be included? Do you have to be included? And what does it mean? So for me, I feel closer to notions of homing, making a place your home, belonging, what makes it that you belong. Where can you be a full human being? And as I said yesterday a bit critically, to be, yes, but you cannot project your, this is me, take it or leave it, every time, because I think notions of care and dignity, you want to care about your impact on others as well. Otherwise, it's only about you. So I could go on and on, but these are things that I reflect about and try to grapple with. And the solution is not easy because you switch from one notion to another. It is a constant embracing of change and discomfort.
But that's because change, I think, is also a very important word at what we are all talking about. So what is change? What do you need for change?
Change is very simply a disruption of the routine. And I'm a professor at a program Leadership and Change, so it's all about change. One of the things that is very difficult for us, for human beings, is to embrace change, because the brains work in a way that you don't want to invent the world every time. You want to rely on things you already know, and so you can counter that and the routine. And if somebody breaks the routine, it creates a discomfort. And in my experience, even the smallest discomforts, like a silly thing like the refrigerator that breaks down or the water that doesn't run, it creates a panic. And then once you have taken your breathing and thought, okay, how are we going to handle this? Invariably, and I can almost promise you, and I've promised myself, and I've been right about this, in the situation of smaller and bigger discomfort, you discover something about the routine you had, which was not that good anyway. And you had to make do in the new situation. I thought, well, this even works better. And that is also similarly in meeting with people who from the surface look like completely different. And I can promise, if you talk long enough, and sometimes it's this shortly, sometimes longer, you will discover that what you share as human beings. So sharing is another concept that is very important.
So, but sometimes people are, I think, so afraid of change that they're also afraid of sharing. So how is it possible how could you convince people to start sharing?
I personally never try to convince anybody. it's the way I was raised. My mother would give us the reasons why she would find something important, and then she would say, but it's up to you. I mean, within certain limits, of course. But the horizon was very big. So from a very young age, I learned to take responsibility for making my choices. So I'm not about convincing anybody. What I try to do is share what has worked for me and share what I've learned and try to learn from other people. So observing what other people do, learning from what works for them, the mistakes they have made, the achievements they have had, that I think, maybe I can do that too. So, yes, I would not try to convince anybody. It is just realizing that change is permanent. Change is permanent, and that is what I have been trying to embrace, and it is not always easy, and that doesn't matter.
And it's also uncomfortable at many times because you have to get used to the change.
But from every discomfort in my life has come a discovery, something new, something that I hadn't thought about. And sometimes we don't often go for that change when we think it might be uncomfortable. We go for that change where we already have thought about, oh, this is going to work for me. But there is so much value in going through the discomfort. And I'm not perfect at it. I don't want to be perfect at it. But I have become less fearful of change because I know after the first minute or after the first hour or after the first day that I think, what are you doing? What are you doing? There will be some new discovery.
So, and a word you have used already a few times today and also yesterday is dignity. Why is that such an important concept?
It's something that we share as human beings. There are two concepts that yesterday I didn't talk much about care, but care and dignity are two central concepts to me. Care are about partly self-care, big care about the well-being of others. And the reason why you have to combine both is that if you only care about the well-being of others, you might suffer yourself and then you're gone. You have to, in a way, take care of yourself as well. But if you only take care of yourself, it's going to be inevitably over the backs of others. So it is finding that balance. And dignity, so everybody needs and has needed in their lives care. There is anybody in this room who can tell me I have lived my life completely interdependent. Nobody ever cared about me. Nobody ever took care about me. I did it all by myself. If you do so, you're a miracle. And I'm not sure what kind of miracle. We all have... We all need the care of others. So it's a human need. And we also need to have the feeling that we have been good to others in whichever way. And sometimes what I think is good for somebody else might not have been. You also have to make sure that it comes from the other party, that you know. And it's not like projecting, this works for me, so it's going to work for you. No. So, but this is another question. So the notion of care. Yeah. And dignity is in the hierarchy of, what's his name again, this famous hierarchy? Come on, scholars.
Maslow?
Maslow, yeah.
Maslow.
Everybody goes with the Maslow, and then way below is, way on the top. And the beginning is, food and housing and survival. And at the top is something like self-actualization and whatever. And I think it's not about self-actualization. I think way at the bottom somewhere is dignity. Is people give their lives. They go in hunger strikes. because they feel their dignity or the dignity of what they believe in has been violated. We all need a sense of that we are worthy to be. Where it gets exaggerated is where you think I'm better than you or I'm more worth than you. I think the very basic thing of dignity is the notion that you are worthy because you're equally worthy as I am. And it is the equal worth of life, the equal worth of all life, including nature, and the equal worth of human beings. That is central, and that is the basis for dignity. And if you feel your dignity is violated, it is because somebody has treated you as if your life, or if what you strongly believe in, makes you less worthy as a human being. And I want you to think of that, reflect on that. What does it mean that the life of everybody and life itself has equal worth? It's not a cliche, it's not a slogan. It has a lot of implications. And using that as a guideline can help to step back moments and say, what am I actually telling myself or telling others when I say this or think that? So I'm not saying that I'm this good person. We're all ambivalent and mixed and all of that. It is what I try to take as anchors. And then with dignity, it is honoring the full human being. The story behind what you do. I have had so many situations, and in particular, it have in discomfort, for instance, when you travel when you are in an airplane or in a train, and you're bound to sit next to somebody you don't know, have never met, and you want your space or whatever. And it is so often in those situations that you come with already your judgment. If this person doesn't do that or does do that, it's gonna make me uncomfortable. It's a very human reaction to protect your space, and some have that need more than others. And invariably, I have made misjudgments, and because you sort of watch what a person does or not, you read your book or whatever, but I've had so many times, not only when it's a strange person, that you are limited by your frame of thinking. That's another thing. The more you know the full human being, the more you know their frame of thinking, and don't project your own frame of thinking. My own frame of thinking has many good things, I hope. And it has many flaws. Thank goodness I don't have to know the whole world, but I can ask questions. I can ask, what does this mean for you? So the curiosity to know about the fuller human being, that can help us to honor the dignity of that person, even when we completely disagree with what that person is saying or doing. That distinction between the equal worth to be, the equal worth to want to belong, the equal worth in wanting to have dignity, to be respected, that is equal. But you don't have to respect everything somebody does or say. I don't, because I am not very tolerant of people who trample on others, of racism, of sexism, but there are ways in communicating that can be respectful of the worth of the other person as a life, and the complete rejection of what that person does.
Thank you. So, and I was also wondering, because so you are a professor also in a leadership program. How can you translate these concepts to leadership?
Leadership is basically taking responsibility to make an impact or changing the life of others. So leadership is in parenting. Leadership can be in friendship. Leadership it's sometimes or many times attached to a position, but it is often leadership in the situation, that you step in and out of it. You see something happening and you think, oh, I need to help that child, or I need to do this, otherwise it comes completely wrong. That is where you take leadership. So taking that responsibility with a sense of respecting the worthiness of others, respecting the worthiness of the environment, that is where leadership comes in. So it is not something completely there. We are all taking the lead, or we are all doing leadership in many moments in our lives. And it depends on the situation, whether it is chronic because of your position, whether it is situational because you step in. But it is the same principle. It's not leadership there and then my way of relating to other people is here. It is completely mixed. So what we do in our program is helping leaders or being on the journey with leaders. We work in a program on leadership and change with students from different geographical spaces, different life experiences. And these leaders are from the student leader to the teacher to the CEO to the lawyer, the performer artist, the chef de cuisine, the consultant, you name it, the scientist, the engineer, you name it. We work, we have those students. And it is working from that diversity that I learn a lot about other people's profession, and that we have sessions with them. We don't have courses, and they can use, if it's relevant to their profession, what we expose them to in a session, for instance about race, or for instance about dignity, or for instance about large-scale changes or whatever, or they cannot use it. So we do not test them all the time. I mean, that can be a whole other conversation with all this testing going on all the time, because you have to measure this and measure that. I'm talking about things that cannot be measured and should not be measured, but should be judged on the impact they can have on making the lives of other people, or your own life, more meaningful and more positively contributing to what the earth or the cosmos or whatever you want to call it has given us, a free nature and a responsibility to we can take as human beings to honor that. And we have not been very good at that, in particular in the capitalist greed, produce context. So we need other values. If you want to change, that is one of the things that I work with, you need to change the things in the deep culture. And if you only do the surface, like more diversity or whatever, you bring people or you bring issues or you bring material in a context that has been already programmed to make hierarchies. And if you do not contest why do you make these hierarchies, which hierarchy serves who, and why do we have to be competitive, why do we have to produce more, why do we have to compete, why do we have to elbow our way, why do we have to do things with technology? Because we can, no matter what the impact is. If we don't question these things, you can make changes on the surface, but it enters the same pattern. One other, can I add one small thing that I had written down today? I think we're making, no, I don't think we make a mistake. I don't know. I wonder what we can learn from the 70s and 60s when the rhetoric in Europe was, oh, they are coming and they are going to go back. Okay? And in the Netherlands, we had already seen, in the UK, that was not happening. But we kept this rhetoric. So, and now it's almost like it was a pattern of thinking. And this morning, we talked about a pattern, oh, we're coming all minorities. But in the US, you see, for instance, young people from Mexico are saying, you know what? I'm going to go back. I don't need the US. I think you have, I'm not completely sure because I don't follow the Dutch news in detail, you have people of Turkish background who say, I don't need this, I'm going to go back. So we think this diversifying or whatever is going to continue. We don't know. So I think it's also good to step back and say, what are we saying with this? Is this really going to happen? And is there another narrative?
Oh, thank you for this addition. So I'm going to give the floor, I have a final question, and I'm going to give the floor to the audience. I think that many people here today, they want to contribute in some way or to try to make small changes. What sort of advice could you give them? It's a big question, I know, but...
Again, I don't like to give advice. No, I'm really.
From your own experience.
No, I'm not truthful about that because, of course, you advise students as well, so it's not that bad. I think the reflecting on why you want to do something, asking people about their lives, and asking why something is important to them. And then go deeper. You can learn from even one story of another person a lot about other human beings. So the curiosity and not or thinking or rethinking twice or maybe 3 times before you think what works for me works for that person as well, because you don't know. And it might be that you think it works for you, but when you have a conversation with somebody else, or when you make more observation, you think it does not work that well for me, actually. The way that person does that works better. So it is this curiosity and constant, this idea that you can learn constantly, no matter where you're from, no matter what you represent. The humility of being open to learning from others. It's not easy, because often we think, I know. Yes, it's stepping back.
Stepping back, that's very, very nice. So, I have to see how we are going to do this microphone-wise, because Philomena has... Oh, there...
I've snatched the microphone.
No. There are 2 more here.
Okay.
So, questions? Yes, there's a lady here in front.
Hello, Philomena. It's nice to meet you. I'm a big admirer of you. I have a question. A lot of companies and also the government think it's important to diversify. So they hired managers, and the managers have to make sure that the companies become diverse, and they have to work to inclusion. What's your opinion about that? Because I'm a manager, I'm such a manager, and it kind of puts a strain on me, because the company says, yeah, welcome. Now you're here, so you're going to diversify the company. But it's kind of yeah, it's awkward and it's difficult. So I would like to know what's your opinion about it and how can we make sure that it happens? Because I think it's good that the government wants this, but how do we do it?
Can I also have your name? I would like to know.
My name is Shirida Sorg.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Sheila, you said, right? Shirida. Thank you. Thank you, Shirida. Diversity has what I call a low ceiling, and in particular when it becomes a purpose in itself. So I can understand how companies go for that because it can be measured. You can say we had this and now we have this, and usually it's not going that fast in that direction. So I can tell something about the program that I work in. Our students are about, apart from all the different, or in combination with all the different professions, 40%, just from the top of my head, on average are African American. And that's way higher in the representation of the country, the US in itself. We have people of Latino background, of different backgrounds. We have different economic classes. We have all kinds of differences. Now, diversity is not a purpose in itself, although we believe that you learn more from experiences that are not your own. And that can be from a person who looks like you, but that can be from and it can be from a person who does not look like you. So, in order, this diversity was not a policy in itself. We did not go and say we need that representation. What instead we did is change the deep values of what university learning is about. We are not competitive, so different than other programs. We work with cohorts, and you can become part of the program among many other things if you can work collaboratively. If you want to go quick, have your PhD and elbow yourself up, fine, do that at another university. In our program, that will not work. Analytical thinking, well, there are different other criteria. Looking at learning as something that is continual, that is not the professor says and you do. It is learning and putting at the center of learning your practice as, and one can translate that as your life experience. That you come in as a student as a whole person and not as a set of walking brains. That you, I mean, there are other, but those are different at other universities. So if you honor the full human being, you get a different picture of somebody who enters the community of learning where we are. That whole idea to want to be part of a community of learning where everybody learns from each other. So you change the deep values and the deep parts of culture of what learning is about. And then you automatically see that who you end up with are a different population. And it's not, and it's the same for faculty. We don't ask students to do, or expose them to things that we are not willing to do as faculty ourselves. My faculty, of the 10 or 11 we have gay people. We have people who love dogs and don't have dogs. You have people who have children and don't have children. You have people who are of a background not from the US, and you have from the US. You have people in, I mean, it's a diversity of faculty. So we are also not, we don't have a profile. That's another thing. If you have a profile, this is what a good manager is about, invariably. Whatever diversity you have in your mind, you're gonna end up with masculine values, white European, middle class, that profile. And gonna measure anybody who comes or employees against that profile. You don't use a profile. We don't have a profile for faculty. We don't have a profile for students. So I could go on and on. It is changing on a deeper level the way you think about working together.
Okay, I'm getting all kinds of signals that one question, and then we are going on with the program because are a little bit. Yeah. We will be here a little bit longer, maybe 10 minutes. So I hope everybody will stay with us. But it would be nice to have one final question.
Thank you.
Oh,
Hi,
maybe sorry, Miss. You already asked 2 questions. Maybe we can go to the lady.
And please tell me your name first.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Mariana. I had a question because I thought that was really interesting. You said about not having a profile. And I was wondering what you think about affirmative action then. Here in the Netherlands, they're trying to use positive discrimination, or in Brazil, for example, where I work, they use affirmative action to have more people enroll in university. And they are quite positive about that. And I was wondering what your take on that is.
I can understand from a policy level the positiveness, because again, it can be measured and you have numbers. If you do not change what the university is about or what the workplace is about, you get people in who then are pressured to adapt. And it's not just about numbers. It's even when you have many more women at university, the format of what a university journey is about has not changed in centuries. So it is about making that deeper change. If you do not do that, you get people who come in and then drop out because of the culture of the university is still tuned to what it was a century ago. Or 2 centuries ago. So, yes, nice, the ceiling is very low if it does not come together with deep change.
Okay, I see all kinds of fingers popping up.
I'm sorry, I'm so elaborate in my answers.
We should have had like hours and hours more, but we have 5 great speakers also giving short presentations for us. So some final inspiration to close off the morning. But thank you very much, Professor Philomena Essed. It was really nice to have you here. Are you going to one of the breakout sessions this afternoon?
I still have to wrap my mind about it. I first wanted to go through this and then see.
So maybe you will see Philomena this afternoon at a breakout session and you can ask your questions. So I'm going to introduce our speakers. So as I said, there's something. It's a pen. I thought it was a glasses. So we have 5 short presentations from very interesting speakers that are going to elaborate on their views on transition from diversity to an inclusive city. And in this case, I would say, because it was a very sharp comment from Philomena, inclusive is not that somebody else is including other people, but room for everybody in this case. We will start with Mary Tupan-Wenno. She's the managing director of ECHO. This is an expertise center on diversity and inclusion with specific focus on higher education and the management of cultural diversity within organizations. Mary.
Thank you very much, Zoe. Thank you to the organization for inviting me. ECHO, the Center for Diversity Policy, is this year we celebrate our 25th anniversary, and so we have been in the business for quite a long time. And the morning was really interesting and gave me a lot of food for thought, but also inspiration to what I would like to present to you. And let me start by saying, from ECHO, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, for us diversity is the mix, and inclusion is making the mix work. And that's a nice way to start. But inclusion is not only about individuals and what we would like to make of it, what our aspirations are, but inclusion is what we have to deal with are systems. And systems of education, systems in society that are not easily to change without big changes within systems. So, and that's the context of my work, and that's why. Especially the previous speakers and the visions of previous speakers, I embrace them as well. But what makes my work also easier are the statistics that have been presented as well. Because, you know, at the end of the day, we have to make sure that not only to measure what we do, but also for individuals and for students that we work with and children in primary and secondary education to make sure what to know did we did our work well, but did it make an impact on individuals and the lives of individuals, and have they been able to progress in society, to progress in education? Okay, I had, thank you, Julia. So can I go to the, yes, well, this is just a slide to show you how ECHO works. So we work with different kinds of organizations, from governments to companies, institutions of higher education, in schools, but we also collaborate, and I want to express that, with students and young professionals from different groups in society. And they are, for us, an important source of inspiration. And one of the previous speakers spoke about narratives, and you know, their narratives are a source of inspiration, but also an important qualitative part to have the stories behind the statistics that we also use. One of the reasons why we have been doing our work for such a long time is, can I have the next slide, please? Is this a chart? And yes, yet more statistics and data. But to me, the gaps in performances in higher education are one of the important why we do our work and why I do this work. Because yes, individuals are able to aspire their dreams, are able to have access to higher education, and I think that was one of the things that I thought was interesting. That in education, there's always a lot of discussion about or talk about, you know, providing access to systems. And I think in the Netherlands and in the city of Amsterdam, access, in fact, we have an open access system. So everybody is basically have access to higher education. But when students enter a university or University of Applied Sciences, we don't, we only start to see them from that moment. But, you know, their life, their trajectory towards higher education is a whole world that we don't know enough about. And sometimes we don't take that too much into account. But I think the stories that they've been, or their trajectories to higher education are in fact an important qualitative source of information for us to, and for institutions to deal with. I think looking back on the work that we've been doing and looking forward, I think there are a few dilemmas or, let's say, important aspects that are always coming back.
I do have to ask you to wrap it a little bit up, Mary.
Okay, good. Wow, that's
the time flies. Yes, I know.
Okay, good. A few things that I think are important to take into account. First of all, diversity is not always the same as quality. Diversity is not always seen as the same. And I think that that's a pity and definitely problematic. Because not everybody has the same expectations about everybody. So, you know, the idea that everybody is the same is a nice idea, but in education, not everybody is taken as the same because of different expectations, and that's why I think it is important to create on a city level, to create pathways to success or pathways to higher education, where you also, where different departments of education collaborate with each other, but where the stories and the narrative of the individual is valued from one part of education to another. And I think what Professor Philomena just shared is that care or support is an important part in that also to navigate the system. Okay, given the time, I will definitely wrap up and. Yeah, maybe leave you with one thing. WeMakeThe.City is definitely a reality, but the language that we use to describe each other and to identify each other is something that we could do definitely a lot more work on, because language is not the same in if we look at the different groups in society. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. It was really good having you here. Sorry that I had to cut you off a little bit. That's the unthankful job of the moderator. Thank you, Mary. Yes. We're going on with Tuna Tasan-Kok. She is a social geographer and planner who currently is professor of urban governance and planning at the University of Amsterdam, the Faculty of Social and Behavioral Sciences. She was recently involved in Diverse Cities, a project examining the relationship between urban policy and diversity in European cities.
In a very, very tiny little nutshell, I'm going to talk about new approaches in urban planning for hyperdiversity. As you will see, my approach is a little different because I'm not a sociologist. I come from a planning background. And that's why I want to give you a little bit background about planning. Planning was a project of modernity. It was based on the principles of utopias implemented by designers and people with capacities like planners, experts. And as Jane Jacobs put in 1960s, it was a discipline to create these dream cities or dream spaces. Although the creation actually didn't really look like dreams, they were very functional. Planning was created for functions. And of course, planning has changed in time, became more instrumental and more open to the society's changes and diversity, and created some instruments of participation, but yet without having too much attention to who these people are that we are planning for, what their needs are, and what they can contribute in the city. So, of course, the results were, But of course, reality is more complex and more dynamic. So, of course, here the question is, how can spatial planning be so inclusive or open-minded to diversity when the needs when there are dynamic, changing, and very different needs, capacities, values, norms, identities exist in the society? It's a very difficult question to answer. Oops. That's why I'm bringing hyperdiversity approach, which is about understanding spatial processes through daily actions, activities, and lifestyles of people, diverse people living in the city. This was based on a research project called Identities that I was involved for 4 years, and where we looked at this approach to shift from an identity-based policies to create needs-based policies, where actually in order to address the increasing needs of this complex society through micro-scale, bottom-up approaches, governance based on social innovation, as well as using placemaking to create meaningful encounters in the cities. In that, I want to refer to urban planning in Toronto, which was my case study in Toronto for 4 years. I find it an interesting case of this form of shift from presumed identity-based policies towards needs-based policies, because in this city, the planning organizations and other social policy organizations are consciously working about the real needs exist in the society, which is very difficult, of course. So you can, for instance, have a look at this example. This was in downtown Toronto. The planning authorities made this interactive approach to create policies to ask people who they are, but these definitions were on the basis of what people do actually and how they feel like, how they use urban space. And they created emojis on the basis of actual people. There were many of them. And they created a book out of it. And they used this in order to look into micro-publics and micro-spaces in the city in order to address all these activities taking place in the city. And in that, I want to give a little example that I looked in Toronto, the Regent Park case, which was a marginalized inner city downtown area with lots of issues, especially with youth involved in crime and gangs hanging around. And of course, lots of property developers looking into this area because of the property values. So of course, open for gentrification problems. So the city and the housing authorities very consciously selected a policy to implement a social development plan where they selected consciously a socially responsible developer. And then they looked into the real needs, skills, and diversity in this area, involving every single identity and community in this area into the process, which was a process also based on one very important principle, no displacement. So they moved the people out of the neighborhood for a short time and they brought them back. Everybody who lived in this area had to live back in this area, but in better conditions. And better conditions meant a lot of places, spaces for meaningful encounters where people can share identities, activities, actions, and stories with each other, where people can learn to respect each other, and also have a constant dialogue and change in policy. They involved social policy agents, they call them, people from the neighborhood. They were just hanging around in the neighborhood, looking out for creating these connections, as we heard this morning, to present them to an upper level policymaking. So the result was this, a very colorful area, using art, especially for young people to be involved in better activities than criminal activities, creating better housing conditions, and also lots of community spaces, and also functions in terms of retail diversity and diversity of different users in the area. So my mission, the mission that was given to me was to answer this question: how can urban spatial planning contribute to a more inclusive city? I think we have to start from people-centered, micro-scale, bottom-up policies. However, for that, we need also long-term visions and commitment, policy commitment from a larger scale policy-making authorities, which will enable us to target systemic inequalities and transformation as a policy focus. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tuna Tasan-Kok. Very Linda Di Pietro. She's the former president of the RINA Association of Young Italian Social Innovators and Policymakers, and she is now the culture manager of Manifattura Tabacci in Cagliari and the Chaos Arts Center in Terni.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for having me. We had a very compact and beautiful morning, so I hope this helps also to have another vision on the same topic. I was born Italian, but who knows what is in my DNA. I come from Terni. Which one? This one? Ah, the other one, yeah. Yeah, okay. This. I come from this city. It's the city of Terni, which is in the center of Italy. And as you see, it's an industrial city. It's very different from all the cities that you can imagine about that area of Italy, very traditional medieval cities. It's a city of 120,000 citizens, of 108 bombings during the Second World War, because it's the city of the main steel factory in Italy. So it also comes with the big crisis in the 80s. This was bringing down the level of occupancy of the 12% rate of unoccupied people. How do we stay at the same number of inhabitants? Thanks to migration, thanks to people coming from all over the world to invent new forms of economy, to give possibilities and vitality to our rural and urban area. This used to be the place that now I run. What it is a 6,000 square meters old chemical factory that after 6 years of works and reconversion has become an art center. An art center dedicated to, at the beginning, was dedicated to a museum. Now the city decided to have a beautiful contemporary and modern art museum. But the museum for whom? So we started saying, please, we run the place, okay, we agree to run this place, but don't call it a museum. We need to start again. We need to change the language. We need to decolonize also the artistic language, the artistic institutions. Museums, theaters are what we know. We need to think of other names, other models. We need to give us the permission to change, to think other ways of calling these kind of places, places of creativity, multiplicity, multidimensionality, places of openness, laboratories. And when I say the higher the status, the harder they fall, is because this was really tough for the city to understand that we didn't need a museum. But when we asked them, what are you doing for the citizens around that place, for the neighborhood? Yeah, but we are giving them the possibility to see shows, to visit the museum. And what we answered was, you're always asking the wrong question. Probably the wrong question is, what are we working for? Who are we working for? For whom we are working? The right question is, who is in charge of thinking the new institution? Who is around the table that we are organizing to think over the new institution? So for us, the switch was to start thinking about a way to co-create this new place, to think over a new role of the cultural institution. And I followed the lines of a friend, which is a PhD in post-digital cultures in Coventry. And for me, the role of the cultural sector in the social-political, economical scenario today is the creation of new institutions, fostering what I call the prefiguration, the prefigurative practices. What does it mean? Thanks to arts and the capacity of art to prefigurate, to think ahead, to foresee, we support the intersection between individual imagination and the collective capacity of social imaginary. So we try to combine these two. We care for the pre. What does it mean, pre? In Latin is before, but it's also what we don't see. It's also what is missing, what is not visible, what is excluded, what is discarded, what is unspoken. So we take care for this world in the new cultural institution. What do? We do also take the reproductive activities out of the ghettos, of the artistic ghettos, which are always a bubble. And those are the ghettos that the capitalism has placed, has created. Sometimes are the nuclear families, some other times are all those services that are born for creativity, culture, engagement, but that are, again, still bubbles. And we take these activities out to the common field, from scarcity to abundance, from fatigue to conviviality. So from a dimension that is soul and individual to a dimension that is multiple. And just to close, the last point is, if we start prefigurating, thanks to culture and the arts, we create an antidote to the arts also, to the arts themselves, to be just spectacle, to be just symbolic. So we avoid the flattening of the arts to a more performative politics. What I don't know whether it's possible to see the video. I don't. No, we really have to round up. Yeah, I just wanted to leave it on, okay, because it was the idea of a collective creation. That was actually interesting for you to see the possibility of this prefiguration to actually happen in reality. So I leave it going. Is the creation of a collective monument. We created the conditions for citizens to get together in the public realm, in the public square, and create together, design, picture, and create an actual collective monument. Part of the creation was through a workshop that included all the neighborhoods of the city, not regarding the provenience, the background, but actually having in mind the idea of creating, so co-creating, giving the possibility to people to realize an impossible thing, that is, create a 17 meters high monument with your own hands and just with cardboards. So I leave the video going because it's longer. As you will see, the construction is going to be growing and growing thanks to the sole force of the collective effort. We said Jerry this morning, in the morning, said the collective effort. So this is like the metaphor come to reality of the collective effort. And in the end, as Bruno Munari said, is a pedagogue, Italian pedagogue that some of you might know, in the creation there is also the destruction. So the creative process brings in also the destructive part. As children do, they always construct big Lego towers and then they pull them down. So the higher the statues, the harder they fall, and the monument in the end will fall down. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is it going? Yeah. That was very, very cool. Thank you very much, Linda Di Pietro. We will go to our next speaker, which is Glenn Helberg. He's a psychiatrist and runs a transcultural psychiatric polyclinic. He's an expert on racism and diversity within healthcare. Further into his career, he was schooled into transcultural psychiatry in order to better support children and youth with diverse backgrounds. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Glenn Helberg, and my educators are my father and my mother. And then I went to the Marnix School in Curaçao, and then I went to Peter Stuyvesant. I had my university teachings here in Utrecht in Groningen, and also my ancestors. And it's very important for me to tell you that this is my education, because very often my education is solely defined as my, what do you call that education? University education. Well, the first person who really taught me about interaction was my daddy. Because my daddy told me that I was Chinese, that I was African, that I was European, that I was Indo-American, but then with these DNA tests nowadays, I know I'm also from the Islam, I'm also from Turkey. So, but my father didn't know that yet. But then in my body, my father said, this line here is from the Chinese, and that there is from the African part, and that is from the white part. And that makes you a whole person. That's what my daddy told me. So what my daddy started with telling me about all those places where we come from, we're going to interact that, and that will be you. Then I went to these universities and I started learning about other things. I learned dividing those things. So one of the things my daddy told me that I'm a whole person, and then suddenly here in Holland in my education I was only, this is the brain, this is the brainstem, this is the emotional body, and this is the cognitive brain, and I was suddenly only the cognitive brain. The emotional body was gone, the brainstem wasn't there, and my whole body wasn't there. I was even asked in my studies, and there it comes, I was even asked in my studies, how do your therapies work? Because you're so extrovert. And I was also, of course, lively, and I love to dance, and as a psychiatrist, I was not supposed to be like that. I was categorized. But then the categorizing is nothing new, because you know that one of the things that happened, that if you look at me, I just told you about my different genetic backgrounds, but starting with colonialism, we know, I wrote it down for you, we know nowadays when we talk about race, race wasn't there before. Before that word, there was this klassenindeling. This, what's indeling in English, please? Somebody can tell me quickly? Sorry? The categorization, indeed. Well, when colonialism started, it was like this. A mulatto is a person, when you're a black person, no, wait here. The offspring of a white man and a black woman is a mulatto. A mulatto with a black person is a zambo. White and mulatto are cuadranos, and cuadranos white with mestiz. And then it continued and continued and continued. And I said I had to learn it here. That wasn't true. I had to learn it in my colonial school, mesties, casties, and all those things. And I'm not a dumb boy, but at that time, I was not able to put that into my head because it contradicted really what I learned at home. But what did these things do? These quadrones and everything, there were also rights to it. The wider you got, the better your position. And, you know, one of my favorite scholars is Schumann Fernando. And Schumann Fernando told me, you know, in our medical world, we do use these things, but not to help people to get better, but to uitsluiten, to exclude people. So Fernando started with the word drapetomanie or drapetomania. And do you know what drapetomania means? Okay, drapetomania means it is an official diagnosis in the history of my psychiatry. Drapetomania means the urge of a black person to flee from a plantation where he was enslaved. And it's crazy, because the dominant part looked at the slaves and they said, we are so good for the slaves, why do they want to flee? They have to be ill, drapetomanie. And a few of these diagnoses were there, but you're laughing. Schumann Fernando also told me about black people can be depressed. And it was something strange. And of course, I read it in a book. But going back to Curaçao with my first Surinamese psychiatrist, he told me, Glenn, our colleagues are telling us that the people here on our island, they don't get depressed. And he said, oh, sorry, And he said, the way they're looking at our people, they can't see it. Because the mindset is that we are dumb. We don't have don't have the brain on top, the cognitive brain, to see ourselves. And then that meant that diagnosis would be missed. But then also here, in Holland, in the beginning of all the migrations of the Turkish people and of the Moroccan people, they used to get problems with the stomach, with getting ulcers. And you know, the people told me, in school, these people cannot think psychologically, so the only way they can express things are by their body. So they said it was a psychosomatic problem. You know that after research, it was a bacteria who caused that. But because of the thinking, how we thought about the other people, the thought of categorizing the people in less and more, knowing more, the thing is that we are all the same. The brainstem, the emotional brain, and then the cognitive brain enter in the body. That's the whole thing. And then I started working. And I started working as a psychiatrist myself, and at a certain moment I stopped. I really stopped. I had to start my own way of thinking. I needed representation because very often I was the only black person in a situation. And you know what happens when you're the only black person?
Glenn, I do have to ask you to wrap up a little bit.
Okay, we'll wrap up. You know what happens when you're the only black person? You think you're special. And you're not special at all. I'll wrap it up. One of the things is people are fundamentally relational. That means under there, it means there's interaction. So nowadays, we have to become interaction specialists. The moment Philomena is talking about a relation, it's about 100% responsibility for me, 100% responsibility for the others, and 50% in the relationship in which we have to take responsibility. So it means, for me as a doctor, when a person sits there, I want to know, I am the specialist, I've studied for that, what are your needs, how can I help you? And then I have to see what are all the interaction that person is experiencing. So it means I have to look at the history of the person, I have to look at the family, I have to look at the situation in which the person lives. I have to look at this important part of the body, that is the part of the body in which we're talking about stress-related symptoms. You don't know how many illnesses we have today that when we bring it back, it goes back to the immune system and it goes back to the stress we're giving each other. Dear people, try to become a person who is an interactional specialist, because the headache you have today might be something big tomorrow, but you can stop that if you start being that interactional specialist who takes responsibility for himself. One thing is great, that's the last thing. We have this pony, we have this place where we treat people, we got it out of the system. But now we have the problems because of the government categorizing us. So we cannot treat the people from abroad, the vluchtelingen, refugees, at the way we want, because policies come in telling us who refugees are. And the other thing is, try. This is really something I experienced. I was in this political party, nowadays we call it bijeen. In there we have everybody with different ways of being and seeing. Having a discussion there, that's where you learn, that's where you start being interactional, that's where you start understanding what is intersectionality, and you stop making policies for the other, but the only thing you want is to engage the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Thank you very much. We are going, we're going to our final speaker, Sene Gegbreap. He is a researcher in neuroinformatics, psychology and cognition. He is head of the Social Sciences Studies Department at Amsterdam University College, and he is also an associate professor at the Psychology Institute of the University of Amsterdam.
Thank you for the introduction. Now for something completely different. Social inclusion at its core is the idea of giving all citizens the chance to participate meaningfully, socially, economically, politically, culturally. And it's important to note this here, even in this context, since the concept of inclusion is at risk of being framed and diluted, much like the concept of diversity has been in the recent past. The ideal of an inclusive society is not new. Ancient empires, like the Roman Empire, understood the importance of inclusion for resilience, social resilience, and social empowerment. The challenge of inclusion was then, and to a large extent is still now, how to achieve it in ways that are effective and fair for everyone, including those that are at the margins of our society. In recent history, the universal right to equality before the law and the protection against discrimination have been at the fundament of social inclusion, have been the drivers for social inclusion. Now, with societies becoming global, more pluralistic and super diverse, new fundamental questions are emerging in our societies. Do universal equal rights, regulated and enforced at the state level, actually deliver equality for all in everyday life, for all in everyday life? And is the call at the grassroots level for differential rights, differential treatments for some groups, is that call a response to the lack of equality in practice? Super diverse societies will have to deal with the right to be treated differently that is growing, that is emerging in the shadows of the right to be treated equally. The digital society may harmonize the emerging shift from the right to be treated equally to the right to be treated differently. And with harmonize, I mean the following. AI, artificial intelligence, technology, may help realize universal equal rights in practice, or it may help facilitate differential rights and treatments for groups. And I will give two examples at the end of my presentation. The digital society, however, also bears the risks of becoming an escape. An escape, a safe space for current inequalities, injustices, and power structures. And traces of AI labels or AI biases, as if you wish, against women, people of color, religious believers, and other minority groups are already prevalent in our digital society. And not to mention sentiments of white supremacy. So, in how far, given this context, in how far the digital society will boost social inclusion will very much depend on who develops AI technology, who regulates its use, and who actually makes use of it. If the who's are demographically not representative, AI will surely increase already existing social inequalities, injustices, and power structures. If, on the other hand, the who's are demographically representative, AI offers an opportunity to come out of the zero-sum frame of inclusion, namely the frame that inclusion for one means exclusion for the other. The challenge ahead of all of us, citizens, communities, corporates, governments, is to both claim our share in the future, in the digital future, and also cooperate in concert. And this is why I'm devoting my time at the moment on the foundation of the Civic AI Lab, which is called CRUL. And CRUL is a cooperation between the University of Amsterdam and the University, the UvA, the Free University of Amsterdam, and societal partners. And it is supported, facilitated by the recently started National Innovation Center for AI. Oh. Yeah. Okay. So the lab aims at going beyond the current mantra of democratizing AI, with the mantra being AI for all. The aim of the lab is AI for all, or the mantra is AI for all cannot be without AI by all. And it focuses currently the lab on the development of technologies that engage, empower, and connect citizens and communities in a fair and in an inclusive manner. What remains to be seen is whether, and this is a challenge that I'm experiencing at the moment, is whether social partners, stakeholders like municipalities, the government, but also civil society, see and understand the opportunities for social inclusion provided by AI, and whether they are willing to actively invest in it and actively help shape it rather than being passive bystanders. Algorithms like the ones depicted here on the slide, one published a year ago in Nature, the other in Sciences, already exist and are ready to be used for social good. And the question is, are we at the position as a collective to not only bring them into practice, but also bring them all together to a new level that allows us to practice inclusion in reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to keep it very, very, very short because for me, I just want to say thank you very much for being here, dear audience, for listening. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you exchanged a lot. Thank you very much to our speakers today. It was an honor to have you all here. For now, the breakout sessions. We are hoping to see you at the breakout sessions. Maybe, yeah. It's important that you take note of the addresses here. These are the right addresses. We are expecting you over there. If people are coming to Connecting College and Community, you will see me again. So I hope to see you there. Very interesting breakout sessions. And please check out the website of WeMakeThe.City for all kinds of beautiful events. There also will be drinks from 4:30 on. So after the breakout sessions, you can still mingle with us in Gansenhoef, in Homeland. Oh yeah, it's also here. Yeah, on Oskam. There will be drinks, and you can also eat and drink all night long in Pension Homeland, and there will be many great activities. So thank you again, and have fun today. Dankjewel. Excuses voor het opjagen.